Hello everyone, MarkyJoe1990 here, and welcome to Fire Mumblem Old Edition. This was my second Fire Emblem hack, and it was the first of mine to have custom maps and events. It was made sometime in 2009, and the reason why I made it was to give Burning Penitent Engine some popularity on YouTube. For those of you who don't know who he is, he's a former friend of mine. We fell out sometime in 2011, and I made this hack purposely for him to do a Let's Play of on YouTube. I made it so that he was the only one who had access to it, so that nobody else would have the ability to Let's Play it themselves and thus give him competition. And this hack has aged absolutely terribly. Back in the day, it was probably considered at least okay, but by today's standards, it's an abomination. Sorry about that. And I don't really need to explain why this is a terrible hack. You'll see in a few seconds. Let's just put in my name. Don't know why I did this. I mean, it's not like it really matters or affects anything, but I did it. And here's one of the reasons why this hack is terrible. The map design is absolutely atrocious. Not only that, but first chapter doesn't even have any context or plot. It's just, oh man, you have units. Go nuts. Anyway, more about the hack. Along with terrible maps, I put absolutely no consideration into challenge and pacing. I basically just arbitrarily placed units in places and hoped that it wouldn't frustrate Burning Penitent Engine to the point where he'd hate the chapter, but I also hoped that it wasn't so pointlessly easy that he got bored of it. So, no consideration into challenging pacing. Along with that, the plot is non-existent. If the first chapter wasn't enough of an indication, the other chapters don't really have much of a plot. There is some dialogue before the chapters start, but it's really kind of meaningless for the most part. And the plot is basically just to serve as a way to give us context while we just beat the living crap out of things. And while the plot is non-existent, the humor of the hack is actually not too bad. Quite a few people said it was a pretty funny hack. Of course, by today's standards, sorry. I personally don't think it's all that funny, but that's just me, and I have absolutely no sense of humor at all, so... Which is actually kind of ironic, come to think of it, because, you know, I made a funny hack, despite having no sense of humor. But I digress. I don't really like this hack. In fact, I was so unimpressed by it near the end of its completion that I decided to basically just remake it. And thus that's why Fire Mumblem Revised Edition was born, which is my third hack, and much better than this one. The plot still isn't there, but the humor is better, the challenge is better, the map design is way better, and the pacing's pretty good. And it also had some pretty interesting ideas thrown along the way. It actually had potential to be a good hack, but I completely lost interest in it after a while. It was... Sorry, hey God. Sorry, allergies. Anyway, Revised Edition was pretty much a way improved version of this hack. A lot of people were excited about it, but after I fell out with Burning Penitent Engine, I basically just gave up on it. But, you know, live and learn. In any case, let's talk about the chapter. As you saw from the beginning, your units are placed in the opposite corners of the map. My intended strategy for this chapter, at least when I was creating it, was that you were supposed to make all of your units join up at the castle and defend. This really isn't an effective strategy. In fact, you'll probably just want to keep Eliwood and Hector up there because they're more than sufficient enough to take out the rather weak enemies. Rather, while you do that, you're going to want to give Nino and Lynn some experience, especially Nino because she's extremely good in this hack. You want to place Lynn and Nino near the lower fort and just have Nino one-hit kill the Myrmidons with Hellfire. If she fails, just weaken them with Lynn, and pretty much just have Hector and Eliwood just kill the shit out of everything. There really isn't that much thought required to beat this chapter. As I said before, there's basically no dialogue. The only dialogue we actually get is with the boss, who should be showing up quite right about now, actually. And as you would expect, it's Bada. And of course I had to make a fitting description, because Bada has ascended legendary status among the Fire Emblem community. But despite what you may be thinking, you know, I think I know what you're thinking. Oh man, he's a warrior! But yeah, despite what you're thinking, he's absolutely pathetic for a boss. He's hardly any more difficult than his original self, despite the fact that he's promoted, which would imply that he at least gained 10 levels and got the warrior bonuses, but nope. He is horrible. And Lynn is going to solo him. Spoiler alert. Something else you might have noticed about this chapter is that on every turn, enemies reinforce. And this really isn't that much of a problem because Eliwood's placed on the throne, and the enemies aren't strong enough to really do anything to him. So, even if you just place all of your units in the opposite corners of the chapter, never to fight a single enemy, Eliwood is he's pretty much invincible anyway. Like, at worst you'd have to protect Nino, but I think she starts at a fort anyway, and she could probably handle herself from there. So the chapter really just defeats itself, really. So, there you go, that's the chapter. And here's Bada. Oh man, new and improved? Improved in what way? Boink. I don't get it. I thought this mod made me full of hacks. Fuck you, MarkyJoe1990! And there you have it, people. The first bit of humor in this hack. There's quite a lot of humor in this hack. And expect it. Wow. That was a poorly constructed sentence. Anyway, once you've beaten Bada, it's more the same of the chapter. You can pretty much just place either Eliwood or Hector at the choke point of the castle to block the enemies. So you only have to deal with one, further trivializing the chapter. And there you go, really. So, with these last few turns, I'm going to explain the characters. Eliwood starts out good, and he becomes a god. Like, his growths have been way improved. He starts with a rapier and a light brand, and he's just amazing. As for Lynn, she's barely been buffed at all in this hack. In fact, I don't think I changed her stats whatsoever. So, considering how some enemies in this hack are actually kind of strong, especially later on, Lynn's not going to be really all that handy. She will be handy in, I believe, Chapter 6, because there's quite a lot of pirates in that chapter, and they have horrible hit, and by then she has a very high crit weapon. But before then, she's going to be pretty much dead weight. Only really there to just kill any leftover enemies. Now, as for Hector, he's kind of mediocre. He reaches the peak of his usability at Chapter 2, because he's pretty much the only unit who can survive the barrage of enemies coming at you in that chapter. After that, he just sort of remains mediocre throughout the rest of the hack. And lastly, we have Nino, who is God. Her growths have barely been changed whatsoever, and considering she was an Est in the original game, this should raise an enormous red flag already, because with her incredible growth, she becomes just invincible, basically. She tears through everything like butter, she's hard to hit, And she actually has fairly good durability for a mage. So yeah, most of this chapter, you're going to want to train her up just for the sake of making the rest of this hack stupidly easy. And I think that's really all I can say about this chapter in particular. I do have a red gem on Hector, but the shop here kind of sucks. And the second chapter has a really nice shop that has all sorts of crazy-ass items. Particularly a light brand, which, by the way, almost every shop has one. So Eliwood will almost always have a ranged attack at his disposal. And the reason why I did this is because I always hated how swords had no extra range to them, whereas the axe had a hand axe, which gave it extra range. And for the spears, they had the javelin. So the sword was kind of just left hanging, especially in the original games where you got a light brand fairly late in the game. Unfortunately, I did not nerf the light brand in any way, and this further augments Eliwood's usability. He's just a complete and utter beast. Another thing that's going to be going on with this game is that every chapter is going to have an armory and shop. I did this because I hate not having access to one, so I reflected this in my level design. And that's the end of the chapter. On the next episode, Episode 2, Reoccurring Villain, a chapter that actually has something going on. Not much, but something. Later!